After I refused to flirt with him, my creep neighbor reported my husband to immigration out of spite. He got detained for 2 weeks while our kids cried nightly. But I had the call recording and an attorney friend who was ready to burn him in court. I still hear my daughter's voice in my head sometimes. The way she screamed when the ICE agents knocked on our door at 5 a.m., I thought it was a nightmare. The pounding, the shouting, the lights outside, it felt like a raid from a movie, except it was happening in our small rented duplex in Garland, Texas. They took my husband, Louis, in front of our kids. He didn't even have time to put on shoes. I kept yelling that he was a permanent resident, that we had all the documents, but they wouldn't listen. They said someone had called in a tip claiming he was undocumented and using a false identity. I didn't know who would do that to us. We didn't bother anyone. Louis worked construction, I worked from home. We paid our rent on time. We minded our business. But as they drove him away, I caught sight of our neighbor, Tom, standing on his porch in his stupid plaid robe, holding his coffee and watching like it was morning TV. 2 weeks later, after endless calls and sleepless nights, Louis was finally released. ICE confirmed the report was false, malicious, and anonymous. But the damage was done. Our kids were traumatized. Louis lost 2 weeks of wages. And Tom, he had the audacity to grin at me the next day and say, "Rough morning, huh? Bet you'll be nicer to me next time." That's when it hit me like a slap. It was him. The same neighbor who had been hitting on me for months, who I'd repeatedly turned down. The same man who once told me, "A woman like you shouldn't have to settle for a guy who barely speaks English." He thought he could ruin my family because I wouldn't flirt back. But what Tom didn't know was that 3 nights before the raid, he'd been drunk and loud on his porch, bragging to another neighbor. I'd recorded it because I was tired of his harassment. And in that recording, clear as day, he said, "I'm gonna call ICE on that guy. Let's see how she feels when they take her precious husband away." I sent that recording to my friend Nadia, an immigration attorney I'd met through work. She told me we had something serious: defamation, harassment, and possibly federal obstruction. So I smiled the next time I saw him, even when my stomach churned. He smirked, thinking I'd finally learned my lesson. He had no idea what was coming. Tom moved in next door about a year before all this happened. At first, I actually felt bad for him. He was divorced, mid-40s, kind of lonely, always talking about how his ex took everything. He'd bring our trash cans up from the curb sometimes, or help me carry groceries if Louis was working late. He seemed harmless, until he wasn't. The first red flag came one afternoon when I was outside watering the little flower patch by the driveway. He leaned over the fence and said, "Your husband's lucky. If I had a woman like you, I wouldn't let her do all the yard work alone." I laughed it off awkwardly, said something polite, and went back inside. But from then on, he started finding excuses to come over, borrowing tools, asking for help with his Wi-Fi, even knocking late at night saying he heard something in the alley. Louis didn't like it. He told me, "That guy watches you too much." But I brushed it off. I didn't want to cause problems with a neighbor. Then one night, I caught Tom waiting outside when I got home from a late grocery run. He said, "You look beautiful when you're stressed." I told him flat out to stop, that I was married, that he was being inappropriate. His face changed in a way that made my skin crawl. He smirked and said, "You don't have to get all defensive, I was just being nice." After that, he stopped pretending. He'd make snide comments about Louis, about his accent, about illegals taking jobs. One day, he even asked, "He's legal, right? Would be a shame if someone made a mistake." Louis wanted to move. I wanted to stay. We had a lease, and it was hard to find another affordable place that accepted families with kids and pets. We just tried to ignore him. Then came that Friday night barbecue. Tom got drunk on his porch with another neighbor, Kevin. I was inside putting the kids to bed when I heard loud voices through the window. Something in me said to record it. I'd already been thinking about reporting his harassment. So I pulled out my phone and hit record. I didn't realize what I had until the next morning, when I played it back while making breakfast. In between his slurred rambling about his ex-wife and politics, Tom said it, laughing. "She thinks she's too good for me. I'll call ICE on that guy. Let's see how she feels when they drag him out." At that point, I didn't know how seriously to take it. I showed Louis and he just shook his head. "He's drunk, he's bluffing." But 3 days later, ICE showed up at our door. And suddenly, every threat, every creepy smile, every joke, it all clicked. That morning changed everything in me. I went from being scared of Tom to being absolutely determined to ruin him, legally, completely, and publicly. After Lewis came home the day they released him, he wasn't the same. He walked like someone had taken a piece out of him, quieter, jumpy at every knock. The kids wouldn't stop asking where he'd gone. Our daughter drew a picture of our family with a big police car and wrote, "Daddy was sad." I kept replaying the raid in my head. The lights, the agent's boots, the way my son kept whispering at night, "Will they take Daddy again?" I wanted to erase it for them, but there was no erasing. Nadia started working in overdrive. She handled the immigration side to make sure they couldn't reopen anything, and she told me bluntly we had to be aggressive on the civilian front. "This wasn't a prank," she said. "Someone weaponized federal enforcement against a family. That's civil rights territory." We filed a formal complaint with ICE's Office of Professional Responsibility and a harassment report with the Garland Police. Nadia drafted a civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and a claim for lost wages. I signed everything with shaking hands. At first, I hoped the city would do something. Officer Ramirez, who took our police report, was sympathetic. He said the department had seen an uptick in neighbor disputes that coagulated into uglier things, but paperwork moves slow. Meanwhile, Tom got bolder. He started creeping up in the afternoons when I was alone with the kids, borrowing our hose or checking the fence. Once, he left a half-empty bottle of cheap bourbon on our stoop with a note, "For when you need to calm down." I snapped a photo of it and sent it to Nadia like it was some talisman of contempt. Word leaked in the complex. People started choosing sides in hushed tones near mailboxes. Kevin, the neighbor who'd been with Tom the night of the barbecue, suddenly acted like he hadn't been there. Others shifted their stares into pity for us. Our landlord, Mr. Hargrove, called and said he'd received complaints about noise from our unit. He tried to guilt-trip me, insinuating my family was drawing attention. I told him to put that in writing. He didn't. Nadia uncovered messier things. She subpoenaed phone records tied to the anonymous call and discovered the tip came from a prepaid phone that pinged near Tom's truck that night. Not conclusive, but suspicious. She issued demands and sent letters threatening legal action. That made Tom furious. He confronted me on his porch one morning, slurring like always, and spat, "You think you can ruin me with a lawyer? You don't belong here anyway." I wanted to slap him. Instead, I recorded him. I'd become a person who lived on recordings, the one who kept receipts like armor. The escalation didn't only come from Tom. The aftermath of Lewis's detention bled into everything. Our savings dwindled from missed paychecks. Lewis refused to take construction jobs that required travel, and the kids' school called me in for a meeting about their anxiety. I started bringing paperwork to school, to doctors, to concerts, proof like talismans that life could be normal again if only people believed it. Then something unmoored the whole plan. Nadia called me late one night after going through thousands of texts and a packet of public records. Her voice was too steady, the kind that means she'd found something she didn't want me to see without being prepared. "You need to come by my office at 9, she said. "Bring the kids' birth certificates and anything else you have, and don't tell Tom you're seeing me." That line, the warning not to tell Tom, landed like a second blow. What did she find that made her cagey? Was it more evidence tying him to the call, or something worse? I felt the anger bubble up into something colder. For weeks, I'd been building a case brick by brick. For the first time, it felt like we were about to find out whether those bricks were resting on solid ground or on quicksand. The photo was grainy, printed from a social media page that had since been deleted, but there was no mistaking it. Tom was standing in a backyard, beer in hand, his arm around a man I recognized immediately, our landlord, Mr. Hargrove. I stared at it, not understanding. "What does this have to do with anything?" I asked. Nadia sighed. "It's not just a picture. Look at the caption." Underneath, in the faint blue ink of the printout, was a tag, "Barbecue at the boss's place, talking new tenants and keeping the neighborhood clean." I felt my stomach twist. She pulled out another page, an email chain between Hargrove and the City Housing Board. Hargrove had been trying to sell the duplex lots for months, but he couldn't because our lease still had a year left. In one message, he complained that tenants like the Garcias bring down property value. Another line, "ICE complaints seem to move them along faster than eviction notices." I could barely breathe. You're saying? Yes, Nadia said quietly. We think your landlord and Tom were working together. Tom does the dirty work, Hargrove keeps his hands clean, and if your husband was deported, you'd have no reason to fight an eviction. It made horrible, perfect sense. The sudden noise complaints, the routine inspections, the fake maintenance issues, they'd been trying to push us out for months. Tom's harassment wasn't just about rejection, it was business. My hands clenched around the printout. I felt sick, furious, and stupid all at once. I thought Tom's motive was twisted infatuation, but he'd been someone's tool, too. And the worst part was how easily they'd both gotten away with it. Nadia leaned forward. We can't go to the police with this yet. We need proof of coordination, texts, money transfer, something. But we can bait them. I looked up, confused. She smiled slightly, that sharp kind of smile lawyers get when they already see the endgame. You told me Tom thinks you're scared of him, right? Let's use that. Make him talk. Get him to brag. These kinds of men always brag. I didn't want to play his game. But I also couldn't sleep next to Louis every night and watch him flinch at the sound of trucks on the street. So I agreed. The plan was simple. I'd be polite to Tom, even friendly. Make him think I'd softened up. Nadia set up an encrypted recorder on my phone that auto-uploaded everything to the cloud. The next afternoon, I went outside while he was watering his lawn. He looked surprised when I waved. He smiled like a snake. Well, look who decided to come around, he said. I laughed nervously. Just trying to keep the peace, you know. My husband's home, things are calmer, he chuckled. Good. Maybe now you'll realize who your real neighbors are. For the next few days, I made small talk, fake laughter, fake kindness. Until one night, he finally took the bait. Drunk again, he leaned close and said, You think Hargrove didn't appreciate what I did for him? He told me he'd take care of me once you guys were gone. Guess that backfired. I froze, pretending to laugh it off, but inside I was shaking. My phone caught every word. That night when I played the recording for Nadia, she sat back in her chair and said, This is it. We've got them both. I felt my throat close up. What do you mean he's not the only one? Nadia pushed another document toward me, a printout of the ICE tip log. 2 separate calls had been made about my husband within minutes of each other. The first matched the prepaid number they'd traced to Tom. The second came from a landline registered to Hargrove Rentals LLC. So it hadn't just been Tom's drunken revenge or Hargrove's greed. It was coordinated. They wanted Louis gone, me scared, and that house empty. I don't remember much after that except the sound of my own heartbeat. Then, somewhere in the middle of the silence, I said, Let's burn them. From that day on, everything shifted. Nadia called in reinforcements, another attorney she trusted who specialized in housing discrimination. They mapped out the attack in stages. One file, a civil harassment and housing discrimination, claimed to freeze any eviction attempts. 2, alert ICE's Internal Affairs Division about the false report, which is a federal offense. 3, leak the story carefully to a local journalist who covered civil rights issues. I was the bait. Nadia was the trap. We started by playing nice. I called Hargrove and pretended I was thinking of moving early if he could help us out with the lease break. He jumped on it instantly. He said he could cut a deal if we were willing to keep things quiet. That phrasing, keep things quiet, made Nadia grin. Meanwhile, Tom was still swaggering around like he was untouchable. He'd wave at me every morning, smirking, as if the worst thing I could do was complain. He didn't know the entire neighborhood was about to know exactly what he'd done. I started collecting everything. Texts, voicemails, security footage, the kids' trauma letters from their therapist. All of it went into a folder Nadia labeled Exhibit Box 1. Louis didn't say much, but every time he saw me and Nadia working late at the kitchen table, he'd squeeze my shoulder and whisper, For the kids. When Nadia finally filed the suit, she did it quietly, a multi-claim civil filing with both names on it. Tom Danner and Robert Hargrove. Within 24 hours, Hargrove's lawyer called trying to resolve it privately. That's when Nadia dropped the next bomb, a copy of the ICE call log and Tom's drunken recording. She gave them a choice, settle with a full public apology and damages, or we go to the press. That same night, around 11 p.m., I saw headlights outside our house. Tom's truck. He sat there for a minute, then drove off. The next morning, my car tires were slashed. I called the cops, and they wrote it up as vandalism, but no one did anything. Nadia told me to install cameras. I did, two facing the driveway and one pointing at Tom's yard. He was unraveling. I could see it every time I stepped outside. He'd glare, mumbling things under his breath. I wasn't scared anymore. I'd crossed the line from victim to someone with a plan. Then, a week later, the journalist Nadia had contacted, a woman named Carmen Leal, called me. She'd found something we hadn't. She said, "You're not gonna believe where Tom used to work before he moved next door." And when she told me, I felt every muscle in my body go cold. I sat there staring at the phone like I hadn't heard right. "An ICE contractor? You mean like security?" Carmen's voice was steady. "No, he worked in data verification, the team that checks names against immigration records before raids. He quit after a misconduct investigation 5 years ago. I found his old supervisor on LinkedIn. Apparently, he was accused of using internal systems to run background checks on neighbors and ex-girlfriends." I felt my stomach drop. Everything suddenly made more sense. The confidence he'd had calling ICE, the way he knew what to say to make the tip sound real. He wasn't guessing. He knew how the system worked. He'd weaponized his old job. When I told Nadia, she was silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "We're upgrading this. This isn't just harassment anymore, this is abuse of federal systems. And if we play this right, we can turn ICE itself against him." The idea seemed impossible at first. ICE wasn't exactly known for protecting families like ours. But Nadia had connections. She reached out to someone she knew in the Inspector General's office, the division that investigates corruption and misconduct. Within 2 days, they called back. Apparently, they'd been looking for Tom. There were other complaints, including one from a woman in Oklahoma who said he'd threatened to make her boyfriend disappear. Now, they wanted to talk to me. When the agents came, two calm, suit-wearing investigators, not like the ones who'd raided us, they took copies of my recordings, photos, and every document Nadia had compiled. One of them said quietly, "He's been on our radar for a while." That sentence felt like oxygen after months of suffocation. But even as I started to feel like justice was coming, something still didn't sit right. There was a piece missing. Tom hadn't seemed worried when I filed the lawsuit. He'd been angry, yes, but not scared. Like he knew something I didn't. Then Carmen texted me late one night. "You might want to see this. Check your email." I opened the attachment and froze. It was a scanned lease agreement hours, but the signature at the bottom wasn't mine. It was forged. The date had been changed. And right next to the fake signature was a notarized stamp that looked wrong. Carmen wrote, "He and Hargrove filed this with the housing board last month claiming you terminated your lease voluntarily. If this stands, they can legally evict you." I felt everything crash again, anger, disbelief, fear. They were still trying to erase us. Even with the lawsuit pending, they were making new moves, new lies. I called Nadia immediately. She didn't even sound surprised. "Good," she said. "Let them dig deeper. The more they lie, the harder they'll fall. But we need to act fast before that fake lease gets processed." By then, the kids were asleep, and Louis sat beside me on the couch, rubbing his temples. He said, "How can people be this evil?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the man next door, the one who smiled while my husband was dragged away, was about to face the kind of exposure that ruins a life. When the investigators called, their voices were clipped, professional, but I could tell they were rattled. They'd entered Tom's property with a warrant after he skipped town. What they found inside wasn't just evidence of harassment, it was a pattern. The house looked abandoned, boxes everywhere, computer monitors still glowing on a folding table. They found fake IDs, burner phones, and stacks of printed records. Immigration files, background reports, even driver's license data, on people from our neighborhood. He'd been tracking at least 9 families, all Latino or immigrant, all renters under Hargrove's management. Every file had notes. 2 kids, husband undocumented, works nights, no lawyer contact. And there, in the middle of it all, was a folder labeled GARCIA. Inside were photos of us, taken from angles that could have only come from our backyard. My daughter playing with our dog, Louis loading his truck, me sitting on the porch on my laptop. I felt sick. But the worst part wasn't even the surveillance. It was what they found in a string of emails between Tom and Hargrove. The messages went back months, long before the raid. Hargrove had written, "Need to clear Unit 12 before sale. You still got those friends who can check paperwork." Tom's reply, Yeah, a few calls should get ice looking. Keep that bonus ready. There it was, proof. Not just a grudge, a business arrangement. But the deeper investigators dug, the uglier it got. Tom wasn't doing this just for money. He'd been running a kind of personal crusade. They found message boards on his computer, full of posts under fake names, where he bragged about helping clean up neighborhoods by getting illegals removed. He'd convinced himself he was some kind of vigilante, punishing people who didn't belong. When I read that, something inside me went cold. This wasn't random. It wasn't even about me rejecting him anymore. That had just made me a convenient target, someone to humiliate on his way down a delusional moral crusade. He truly believed what he was doing was right. Nadia told me quietly, "He's not just a creep, he's dangerous. Men like this think they're patriots." And Hargrove, he'd used Tom's sickness as leverage. He dangled money, whispered about taking back the neighborhood, and let Tom do his dirty work. Every raid, every threat, all because they wanted higher property value. For weeks I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those photos, the way Tom must have been standing there, watching us through the fence, cataloging every moment of our life. Then Carmen called again. "The story's ready, but I need your go-ahead to publish names." I looked at Louis, at our kids asleep on the couch, and said, "Do it." Because suddenly, revenge didn't feel like rage anymore. It felt like truth. The kind that scorches the earth so nothing that rotten can grow again. The article hit like a bomb. Headline: Landlord, former ICE contractor accused of targeting Latino families with false immigration reports. Carmen didn't hold back. She included screenshots, excerpts of Tom's recordings, and the emails with Hargrove. My name wasn't hidden. I didn't care. By noon, the story had gone viral in North Texas. People started showing up at Hargrove's office with signs. His tenants flooded review sites. Someone even started a petition demanding an investigation into housing discrimination. Within 48 hours, the city suspended his rental license pending the federal probe. His for sale deal collapsed, and investors backed out. He tried to reach out through his lawyer, offering a quiet settlement. Nadia responded with 2 words: public apology. We weren't settling for silence. Tom, meanwhile, was found 2 states away, living out of his truck behind a gas station in rural Arkansas. The Inspector General's office coordinated with state police to detain him for questioning. They found more evidence in his truck: flash drives full of personal data, fake tip forms, and correspondence that linked him to multiple ICE complaints across 3 states. He'd been doing this for years. When federal charges finally came down, identity fraud, filing false reports, stalking, I went to the hearing. He looked smaller in person, unshaven, jittery. When they read out what he'd done to us, he tried to smirk at me, but it didn't land. I didn't even blink. Hargrove got his own reckoning: civil penalties for discrimination, breach of contract, and a pending federal charge for conspiracy. He lost all his properties by the end of the year. Last I heard, he was trying to rent a trailer under his wife's name. As for us, we moved. Nadia helped us find a house in Plano with a new landlord who didn't flinch when Louis showed his green card. The kids started sleeping through the night again. Louis started laughing again. It took time, but we built something steady out of all that chaos. One evening, I sat on our new porch, scrolling through the last email from Nadia. Settlement approved, all conditions met. Wire confirmed. Case closed. I didn't smile right away. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something colder, steadier, the kind of satisfaction that comes only when someone who thought they were untouchable finally hits the bottom. I still have the recording, the one where Tom bragged, "Let's see how she feels when they take him away." Sometimes I play it once quietly, and then delete it again, just to remind myself that I won. Because he thought fear would break me. He thought ice, power, and lies would crush us. Instead, he built the stage for his own destruction. The last time Carmen and I talked, she asked if I had a quote for her follow-up piece. I told her the only line that felt right. Some men mistake silence for submission, but when you push the wrong woman, she learns how to burn your whole world down legally. And then I closed my phone, looked out at the quiet street, and breathed free, safe, and done.